to the Adventures with the McCrary's. Today, we're going to be going over a DIY build, tabletops for the top of dog crates. We have 2 dogs, a boxer and a husky, and their crates stay in our living space, and they're kind of an eyesore for anyone who walks in. So, to dress them up and make them more functional, we're going to be building this DIY build. We're going to be going over supplies, the equipment required, and then you're looking at roughly $50 to $100 for this build, depending on the type of wood you use, as well as the type of paints to spruce it up. So without any farther ado, we'll get to the video. But if you like the video, please don't forget to hit the thumbs up. And please, if you want to see more DIY cooking and then just family hobbies, please subscribe. It'll keep the channel going. Let's get to it. So to begin, we ran out to our local Lowe's and grabbed 2 of these boards. Our cages are 28 by 42, so it's going to take 2 of them to make the cage wide enough, or the top wide enough to cover the cage. And the tops we're going to be into making today are going to end up being 32.5 by 45.5 inches, and they're about 1 inch thick pine. So as you see me here, I'm gluing the boards together and then getting as many clamps as I can to make sure we clamp them and make sure that they're straight. The biggest thing here is to make sure you give enough time to glue, as well as getting enough clamps on there to make sure that you don't get any bowing in the center. So also while you're at Lowe's, you're going to pick up a 2 inch by 1 inch and 6 feet long pine boards. They're about $1 each. You're going to need about 4 of them to build one of these tables, just 1 for each side. These are going to allow you to add an edge or a lip that will make sure that the tops do not fall off of the cages while the dogs are in them. So you're going to take those boards, cut them the length for each side, and that is going to be kind of just outside of the edge of your cage. You're going to glue those down and then clamp them, so then you can drill pilot holes and then put screws about every 3 inches down the edge of each side of the board. Once complete, it's time to pick it up and make sure you got a good fit. So I kind of did this part a little bit backwards. Usually you're going to cut the board to size before you actually glue down your edge pieces. I decided that I wanted to cut after I just got the whole fit correct around the cage. So I'm going to now use my circular saw with a straight edge that I'm going to clamp onto the board to cut my top flush with the side rails I just created. Now, like I said, usually you're going to do this before so you don't end up catching your side rail, but I've done this a few times now, so I feel comfortable enough that I won't mess this part up. So I'm going to go down each side and just cut off the excess to make sure it's flush. This also can be done with a table saw, or honestly you could do it with a hand saw, but it would probably take you a little bit of time. I picked the circular saw, and really the trick of the trade here is just to make sure you have the larger side flush against the wood and not the shorter side, so you get a good balance, even cut, and you don't have any bend left or right. And I like to mark and cut maybe a little bit on the conservative side, so I'm not possibly cutting into it, and I'll do multiple passes just to make sure that I'm not digging into more wood than I want to, because you can always cut more wood, but once it's cut, you can't put it back on. So this next part is completely optional, or you could possibly use a hand sander or just your own, just some sandpaper. But I want to put a nice decorative edge using my router. So I'm going to go around this router with a decorative bit to get a nice rounded edge with a little bit of a lip on the top of the table. This will make sure you don't have to worry about any splintering later, and just makes the tabletop look actually complete. So any good woodworker knows you're probably going to spend about 40% of your time actually putting the project together, and then the 60% of your time literally just sanding and finishing the board to make it look nice and making it ready for that final paint or stain that you're going to end up putting on it. So I'm going to go at it with the belt sander just to try to get this thing level and make sure that I am taking off a lot of material at a time, and then after that I'm going to take it to the random orbital sander and make sure that I'm getting this thing start to smooth. I'm starting at about an 80 grit and I go all the way down to a 220. Now you're gonna see me sand and finish both sides of my piece of this table. The bottom side's kind of optional if you don't want to have to do that, but I like doing it just so the piece looks complete. So I'll give the bottom a little quick sanding, nothing like I would do the top, but just to give it that overall quality feel. So here's a look at what we've done so far before we actually put the stain on. There's the bottom where we screwed everything in, making sure everything is flush around that edge, and that little lip along the top where the router bit gave us that nice decorative edge. Next up is going to be the pre-stain. This is going to make sure that the stain goes onto the surface evenly and there's no streaking, especially since we're using pine. There's a tendency for the wood to streak without it. I usually put this on 15 minutes to roughly an hour prior to me actually staining, just so it can actually start to work into the wood and into those wood fibers. As I've already said, we have 2 dogs, so I'm going to do both of them here. As we move in, you'll see that the color of the wood has changed just a tad. The pre-stain is actually soaking into those wood fibers and it's going to give it a warmer hue. So the stain we're going to be using today is a Minwax Pure White, and we have dark floors in our house, so we didn't want a dark stain to blend in with the floor, but we also did not want it to be so bright that it was the only thing you would really see in the room. So to put this stain on, you're just gonna get a synthetic brush and wipe in the direction of the grain. So as you see, I'm gonna go up and down the board here, and you can be kind of liberal with this stuff, but just remember, if you read the instructions on it, it tells you to wipe it off immediately. If you leave it on there for too long, it's gonna get really streaky and almost look like just a bad paint job. I let it sit for just a little longer than the instructions said, so I could do a little bit less coats and still get that white finish that I wanted. So between each layer of stain, I would sand with 220 grit sandpaper with my orbital sander, just a quick sanding to make sure that the next layer wasn't going on any type of buildup. After that, I put on shellac, again using a brush, go in the direction of the grain, and this is gonna actually add that final layer of protection that you're gonna be looking for. So shellac dries pretty fast, so I gave it about an hour between each coat and did 3 layers, again sanding with 220 grit sandpaper between each layer. This next and final step is completely optional. At this point, the shellac should be plenty enough coverage to protect against any type of spillage on top of the piece. And you could take this piece right as it is right now and stick it on top of the dog crate and be done with it. But my wife and I both like the antique look, so we're gonna finish this piece off with a couple layers of finishing wax. So if you don't already know, finishing wax is a great way to add just one more layer of protection onto a tabletop or any piece of furniture that you might have that might have lost its shellac or finish over time and could use a little bit more protection. And it also is a great way to add a kind of artistic, rustic feel to a piece. It's a 2-step process. You're going to be using a clear wax, and you're also going to be using a dark wax on top of that. The clear wax acts as a foundation and that initial extra protection, while the darker wax gets into the grains and the edges and nooks and crannies of the piece to make it have an aged feel. So I used an old t-shirt to put on the clear wax. This seemed like the easiest method to go about getting that wax layer on liberally and evenly. And then after it had set for a while, I just gave it a nice buff to make sure it gave a little bit of a shine. Then I used a wax brush and the darker wax to go along each edge, and then some of the darker areas or the lower grains within the top of the wood to give it that antique feel. The dark wax I ended up wiping off at the end in the areas that were not really the nooks and crannies and just made it kind of look dirty, such as the whole top in itself. And there you have it. As you can see, the one on the left is definitely, it's got that aged rustic feel to it, while the one on the right has kind of a lesser, flatter, muted feel. I really truly believe that the 2-step finishing wax process adds a level of complexity and a level of just grandeur to the piece. So there you have it, folks. Those are the two tabletops we created for our dog crates. The one on the right still had to be finished with the finishing wax, but that was done after this video was shot. I had a blast completing this DIY project, and I think it added another piece of furniture that we already kind of had with the crates already being in the living room. Please, if you like this project, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. And until next time, don't forget to live your own adventures.